All right, so welcome aboard, people. Welcome aboard Sports Study TV. I am your host. Today, we talking about ESPN's woke era over. That's the topic that we are covering on this short video, and it's a discussion that's being had around the sports community, especially the people who follow ESPN. Now, depending on where you are on the social media platforms, if you're on X, everyone is telling you that the ESPN woke era is over. If you go to platforms like Threads, they want to boycott ESPN because they're not happy with the programming at ESPN. What is ESPN doing? Are they transitioning away from the more liberal politics, or are they just saying, "Hey, this is what's good for our bottom line," and that's why they're cozying up with the Trump administration? Um, so we will discuss it. We got a couple sections here I want to talk about. Now, there was an article that was written by Front Office Sports. I believe the guy name is, what's his name? So we don't get this wrong. Michael McCarthy from Front Office Sports argues that ESPN's so-called woke era may be over. And his argument comes after Pat McAfee was publicly greeted he publicly greeted President Trump at the Patriot Games, an event attended by, of course, Disney CEO. Um, what's the Disney CEO guy's name again? Forgot his name. What was his name? Josh D'Amaro and and also the chairman Jimmy Pitaro, the ESPN's chairman. So both guys were in attendance. Now, that's probably not that unusual considering that alone isn't the smoking gun here, because obviously it's an event that's streamed on ESPN. So of course the two people that head the joint will probably be there. So that's not the big gotcha moment there. But we do remember that there was a merger that happened earlier this year between ESPN and NFL Network that needed approval from the federal government. So once that happened, we know we know how that goes. So ESPN clearly looks different today than it did several years ago, right? The network once faced constant criticism for allowing personalities to discuss liberal politics. Now, some of its biggest stars appear comfortable around Trump and conservative media figures. So, do you believe ESPN's woke era is really over? Right? Has ESPN moved to the right? Or is the company simply following the money? Does appearing with Trump automatically make someone conservative? These are the questions that are being presented out there to people to discuss. Now, to understand why people are asking these questions, we have to compare today's ESPN with the ESPN we saw during Trump's first term. ESPN's previous battles with Trump is well known, right? Trump and ESPN had a hostile relationship during his first term. Back in 2017, former ESPN anchor Jamel Hill called Trump a white supremacist on Twitter. Trump demanded an apology, and the White House described her comments as a fireable offense. We all remember that. That was a big thing that blew up. Trump also accused ESPN of losing viewers because of his politics and programming. So back then, ESPN personalities appeared to have a more freedom to express political opinions. The company disciplined Hill, of course, but her comments became part of a much larger perception that ESPN had turned into a liberal political network. So, was Jamel Hill wrong for making those statements back at ESPN? Should sports personalities be allowed to express political opinions on their personal accounts? And did ESPN actually punish liberal politics, or did conservative media exaggerate the problem? Now, those are also questions that are presented, and you can answer them as well. Whether that criticism was fair or not, ESPN eventually started changing its lineup because of people were being outspoken about it, of course. Liberal voices leaving ESPN. Several outspoken or left leaning personalities have left ESPN over the past decade. Jamel Hill, of course, took a buyout in 2018. Dan Lebatard left in 2021. And ESPN canceled the High Noon with Bramati Jones and Pablo Torre in 2020. Both Jones and Torre were gone by 2023. So when one or two personalities leave, you can call it normal television business. When several outspoken liberal voices disappear while ESPN announces a stick to sports strategy, it starts looking like a deliberate shift. That doesn't necessarily mean ESPN became conservative. It could mean the company decided political controversies were hurting its bottom line. So, did ESPN intentionally remove liberal voices? Do you believe that? Let me know in the comments. Were those decisions political, financial, or based on ratings? Some people say they were based on ratings. Some of those shows did not have high ratings. But were the low ratings due to the fact that those individuals were political? Because I think it all falls in line together. The ratings, the decisions to be political or not political, that all could be wrapped into one problem. Why does stick to sports usually come up when someone expresses a liberal opinion? If you have a liberal opinion, you're told to stick to sports. If you have a more conservative leaning opinion, you're praised. That's how it feels. That's how people see it. And now, if you're on the other side of it, you may look at it the opposite way, right? It all depends on who has the loudest voice in the room at the time. So that brings us to ESPN's current biggest star, Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee and Trump, right? McAfee has developed a friendly public relationship with Trump. He's interviewed him, visit the White House, greeted him at the Patriot Game. McAfee maintains that his show isn't political, but critics have started calling him McAfee. McAfee. That's funny. Sorry. McAfee can support or associate with anyone he wants. It's a free country, right? But he can't repeatedly host Trump, visit the White House, and participate in presidential events while expecting everyone to view his show as completely apolitical. So if Jamel Hill's political opinions became an ESPN controversy, then McAfee's relationship with Trump deserves the same level of examination, right? Or no? I guess it depends. I guess you get to decide that as the audience, as the viewer. Would ESPN respond differently if McAfee had this type of relationship with a progressive politician? Is ESPN applying the same rules to everyone? Sadly, I think the bottom line here is that when you try to McAfee has an audience. Jamel Hill did not have much of an audience, or others like Jamel Hill. And I think that's the bottom line. I'm leaning towards the fact that yes, I think ESPN is cowering down to Trump after being a little hostile towards the administration in the first term. But they realized that from the business side of things, it was not good business to roll with the more liberal side. For whatever reason, the money just ain't there. And so they decided the best business move is to kiss up to Trump. And that's what you're seeing. This is what you see when business makers that are people who handle billions and trillions of dollars in the boardroom. They don't always look at things from a more liberal conservative. They look at it from a green, a money, a business. So that's pretty much how it goes. Now, McAfee isn't the only major ESPN personality who doesn't fit into the traditional political category. We know by a guy by the name of Stephen A. Smith. Smith has discussed possibly running for president as a Democrat in 2028, which is a joke, by the way. But however, he regularly appears with conservative personalities and has taken positions that conflict with parts of the Democratic Party. So Stephen A. is difficult to classify politically. He may call himself a Democrat. He may even call himself conservative or independent. But that makes him valuable at ESPN because he could attract attention from different political groups without the network officially choosing a side. And that's the one thing about Stephen A. that makes him very popular and very valuable to ESPN. He hasn't been pigeonholed. Um, so the personalities are important, but money may be the biggest reason ESPN has changed. ESPN reportedly reached around 100 million homes in America in 2010. Cord cutting has reduced that number to approximately 60 million homes or fewer. So that's a big jump. When you lose 40% of your you know your subscribers, your home people, audience, that can really make you shift how you view things. The network can no longer rely on the same cable subscriber revenue it once received. This may explain ESPN's strategy better than any political argument. When ESPN reached 100 million homes, it could survive political controversies. Excuse me. Man. All right. With the audience and the cable revenue shrinking, of course, the company can't afford to alienate millions of potential customers. ESPN may not be changing its beliefs, it may simply be protecting its business. So, what do you think? Do you think ESPN's political shift is based entirely on money? Let me know in the comments. Would ESPN still make will still be making these would ESPN still have made these changes if cable television was still in a healthy spot? We know cable's gone, pretty much. The financial pressure also gives ESPN a reason to maintain a working relationship with whoever controls Washington, because we know all power leads to Washington. Washington, D.C., that is. The ESPN, Disney, and political power. Let's talk about that. Disney and ESPN have business interests that can be affected by the federal government. Major media agreements, and mergers may require regulatory approval. Maintaining a decent relationship with the president can therefore benefit the company, which is the case with any company. So this is where the stick to sports argument falls apart. ESPN may discourage its employees from expressing political opinions, but Disney's executives still have to deal with political leaders behind the scenes. That means the company hasn't escaped politics. It has moved political discussions into the corporate office. So, is this political favoritism? Should viewers trust a network that says it avoids politics while its executives work closely with political leaders? They want their cake and they want to eat it too. So has ESPN actually became less political, or has it simply changed which politics it accepts? I don't believe politics has disappeared from ESPN. The network has become less comfortable with outspoken liberal commentary while becoming more accepting of personalities who appeal to conservative audiences. That doesn't necessarily mean ESPN is now a right wing network. It means ESPN is adjusting to financial pressure, a divided audience, and the political power of the current administration. ESPN says fans want to stick to sports, but if that rule applies mainly to liberal opinions, while conservative commentary receives more freedom, then ESPN isn't politically neutral. It has simply changed direction. So, in final closing here, the question is I want the audience to answer: is ESPN still woke? Has ESPN moved too far to the right? Is the network treating liberal and conservative personalities equally? Do you want politics completely removed from sports coverage? Can sports and politics realistically be separated more? Let me know what you think. Is ESPN's woke era really over, or is the network simply doing whatever it takes to make the most money? That's pretty much where we stand. So let me know in the comments, what is your take, ESPN? I tend to think that ESPN was never really woke. They're just about the bottom line. The bottom line. Bottom line. There you have it, folks. That's it for Sports Day TV. We'll be back later on for some more stuff. Let me know what you want us to talk about. Remember, this is Sports Page. Sports Fan.